Joining us now from Christopher Newport University. He's been up late burning the midnight oil. Didn't get back to me till midnight. Got to get some sleep there. Dr. Quentin Kidd, head of the Judy Wasson Center for Public Policy at Christopher Newport University. Great to have you, Dr. Quentin Kidd.
Good to be with you.
You're getting 4 hours of sleep a day like me these days.
Well, it's that time of the season. And the really nice thing about Virginia is that we have an election season every fall. A lot of states don't have that. A lot of states have an election season every other fall. We've got one every fall. So you and I lose sleep on a regular cycle every year.
Yeah, you get fired up, though. You get the adrenaline going. I mean, there's 11 days, and it's going to be very interesting. I really think that there's a Republican wave that's going to hit in the next week and a half across the USA. And I don't think it's because Republicans – I don't think that people get up and they say, wow, Republicans are the answer. It's just the other guys are worse. And I think that's playing into it. Now, why I wanted to get you on, Doc, as you know, I am your number one statewide proponent of the accuracy of your polls. I'm your polling cheerleader because they're spot on. I don't care what people say about how you weight it. I look at the facts, and you guys are always right. So I think you have the best polls in the state of Virginia. You had this one yesterday that I thought was really cool. You did a millenniums-only poll. Can you share with our audience some of your findings with that?
Yeah, we had been hearing a lot, and I think there's been a discussion around the country, really, about whether millennial voters, these are voters that are 18 to 34, 35, whether they would turn out on Election Day this year like they have in the last couple of past session elections. And in fact, the McAuliffe campaign worked really hard in 2013 to turn out millennials. There's some indication that they turned out at sizable numbers. But this year it looks like they're not engaged, and so we thought we would take a snapshot of Virginia millennials and see how engaged they are and, what their intentions were in terms of voting. Now, it should be no surprise to anyone that millennials are far more Democratic than they are Republican, but they're even more nonpartisan. They're not interested in either political party. The extent to which they're interested in a party, they're more Democratic than Republican. They voted overwhelmingly for Barack Obama. They voted, those who did vote in 2013 voted more for Terry McAuliffe and Ken Cuccinelli. They say they're supporting Mark Warner this year over Ed Gillespie by a pretty sizable number, but Robert Sarvis is attractive to them. This group of voters tends to be more libertarian-oriented in terms of social policy, and Robert Sarvis is attractive to them. But the real big question mark that hangs over all of this is whether they'll actually vote. And the number that stands out to me is only 41% say that they're paying very close or somewhat close attention to these elections. That means 59% of them aren't paying attention at all. And you and I know that when somebody's not paying attention, they're not likely to vote on Election Day.
Right, no doubt. I mean, you got to get them engaged, and I don't think that's happening in this particular midterm. But I want to get back to the fact that voting or not, Robert Sarvis, the Libertarian candidate, is in a solid second place, 28%. I found that shocking.
24%, that's right. But I don't, and here's why I don't. Robert Sarvis, so for most of us who pay attention to elections, Robert Sarvis is almost, yesterday's news. He ran as the third-party candidate last year for governor. He's running again for U.S. Senate. At some point, I think third-party candidates wear their welcome out really quickly.
Right.
But I don't think that's the case for millennials, for younger voters. Robert Sarvis, for younger voters, is actually a breath of fresh air. He's a different message. He's a message about things they're interested in, especially on social issues. And he spent a lot of time going to college campuses around Virginia and talking to students. And I think that really is where his numbers come from. I think you get much beyond the upper 20, low 30 range, and he loses his cachet. But I think for people in their 20s and early 30s, he's a breath of fresh air from politics that they don't find very tasteful and parties that they don't find speaking to their issues very well.
With Dr. Quentin Kidd, he's the head of the Wasson Center for Public Policy and Politics at Christopher Newport University, and he's also the CNU polling guru, also a professor of political science, and he's got that PhD and all that good stuff. Doc, another shocking thing that I found is only 11% of millennials are going for Gillespie. I mean, that is a pretty anemic number.
Yeah, and I think that's explainable as well. I understand where that's coming from. I think one of Ed Gillespie's big weaknesses, and you and I have talked about this before over the course of this election, is that so many people say they don't know enough about him. I mean, he had a name ID recognition as recently as a month ago in our polling. And so if the normal everyday voter out there, the person who pays a lot of attention to politics and votes regularly, say in their mid-50s, isn't sure they know enough about Ed Gillespie, then imagine how this generation, the millennials, are. And I think Ed Gillespie has a name ID problem as much as he has any kind of problem. I think amongst millennials, Ken Cuccinelli at this point in the governor's race was far better known, and far better known in the sense that millennials may have known whether they were going to oppose him or support him. I think a lot of people don't know Ed Gillespie amongst millennials, and that's really his Achilles heel in this race amongst this particular group of voters.
Well, if you look at Cuccinelli, for all people said he was too strident, too conservative, things like that, as I recall, now I'm going from memory, my memory's pretty good, but amongst millennials right about now, he was in the mid-20s. So he was double it. He was like 25 or 26, so he was double and a half of what Gillespie has. And I think it's because, agree with him or not, he stood for something, and people knew what he stood for. And I've been very critical of the Gillespie campaign because if you ask 10 people, 10 of them have no idea what this guy stands for on anything. He says nothing. And, I mean, he's got little catchphrases like, ease the squeeze and GS squared to the fifth degree or something. Nobody knows a damn thing what any of this stuff means. And I think when you're coming from behind and you're trying to resonate with young people like, say, Reagan did, Bob McDonnell did, Bob for Jobs, you got to say something. Yeah,
I think you're on to something there. I think so. Another fascinating thing we find in this survey is that I would characterize Virginia millennials this way. They feel like they are carrying a heavy burden. They say that they're carrying that their economic situation is worse than their parents' economic situation at the similar stage in their lives. 80% of Virginia millennials agree that their generation faces more economic challenges than their parents. They don't think government is really doing things to solve the problems of their generation, but they see politics as really important to solving problems that the nation faces. They want to be engaged. They think their generation can make a difference. And so I think they want an optimistic, forward-looking message. And I think you're right. I mean, I think any candidate, Gillespie, Warner, Cuccinelli, has to say, this is what I'm for, and this is why what I'm for is related to you and why you should vote for me. And I think that's what they're looking for. And so Gillespie's problems are compounded if he has a name ID recognition problem amongst this generation and he's not saying what he's for, then he's got a compounded problem with them. And that, I think, explains why amongst these voters he's trailing so badly.
97% is not a visionary message. Christopher Newport University, I think he does the best polling out there. I also think he's the best analyst. And Dr. Quid, you have nothing to do with this statement, so you can shut your ears, but Larry Sabato, #lab, lame and boring. That's why I like to get Dr. Quentin Kidd on. He's a rising star. So I go with the winners, man. I go with the up-and-comers. #lab, Larry Sabato. Now, Quentin Kidd, let's look in the future here. And I know you always bristle when I ask you to make some predictions, but but that's part of the deal. Nationally, I think Republicans are going to win 9 seats in the U.S. Senate. First I said 7, then I went to 8, now I'm going 9. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I'm not bristling, but I'm hesitating because my hesitation is that in most of these states, Alaska, Arkansas, Colorado, particularly Georgia, for example, Iowa, the polling, we're within the margin of error in a lot of these races, and I think it's going to come down to turnout. And the reason I hesitate is I think if a race is in the margins going on into Election Day, the Democrats have in the last several election cycles perfected this turnout machine that they have. We saw it in the governor's race last year.
Yeah, we did.
Here in Virginia. And so my hesitation is to say, if a Republican is up outside of the margin of error, then that says something to me. But if the Democrat and Republican are within the margin, then that says to me that a strong turnout is going to be good for the Democrat. So I'm hesitant to say that there's going to be that kind of a sweep. In some places, the Democrats are going to get it. In other places, the Republicans are going to get it. For example, in Arkansas, what is Bill Clinton worth in Arkansas? I mean, my guess is Bill Clinton is worth 3 or 4 percentage points in Arkansas, and so will David Pryor outperform the expectations by several points because Bill Clinton has been in the state several times to help him? Is there anything that can help Mary Landry in Louisiana? I'm not sure. But so I think there's going to be a little bit of variability there. So I'm hesitant at this point to say there's going to be a sweep. The odds are certainly in Republicans' favor. The odds are in Republicans' favor to take the Senate. But I think there's a bigger question as well here. If Republicans can take the Senate, and it convinces them that they don't have to deal with things like immigration, then I think they're setting themselves up for a tough time. In 2016, it's already going to be a tough time for them. But Republicans may fool themselves into thinking they don't have to deal with some fundamental issues like immigration, and that are going to change the face of the Republican electorate going long term, several years down the road here. So I think there's a lot going on in this election cycle that might be nuanced more than it is straightforward.
I have to tell you, Dr. Quentin Kidd, with that last statement you made, I agree with you 100%. I think if the Republicans do take over the Senate, if it's more of the same, doing nothing, they will lose in 2016. I think they're going to have one shot, but before they get there, they've got to win these states. And as you said, it's going to be turnout because I think they're going to win by 9. But if you look at every one of these states, they could in the last 10 days end up going the other way. So a lot of them, there's only really 4 states now that are gone for Democrats. Really, that's Montana, South Dakota, West Virginia, and Mark Begich isn't going to win in Alaska. Those 4 are definitely gone. Mail them in. But the others are all within the margin of error.
Yep, that's what makes me hesitate. John, think about this: if the Republicans take back the Senate, they will have taken back the Senate, running a campaign against, not telling people what they're against, not what they're for. They at best will have a 51, 52 seat majority in the Senate. Well, we only have to look at the last several years in the Senate to know that it requires 67 votes to get anything done. So what are they setting themselves up for? I mean, if they don't have an agenda that they're running for or on, then they don't have a mandate to place on the table against.
You're right. We're out of time. We want to thank Dr. Quentin Kidd, Christopher Newport University, for being with us.